And some of them are just still the common sense stuff that he's been doing this whole time. So the first is chapter 11, and chapter 11 basically says, have a CRM, use your CRM, use the CRM for everything you do. And that's it. Because essentially you're working with so many different people, you're going to be running into folks, you're going to be seeing, and he uses the example of like trade shows and events and that kind of stuff quite often. You're always going to be running into people, so you need to have some kind of contact system. I would even go so far as to have a checklist as well. When I use checklists, I don't just use like a regular Google type checklist. I use something that's a calendar / checklist, whatnot. So anyway, use your CRM, use it for every action, every activity, everything you ever need, and all the notes. That was an easy chapter. Moving into 12. And 12's got a ton of common sense stuff. He's basically telling you, up until this point, use the phone, pick up the phone, call people, call people, call people. And then he's going to spend just 2 chapters talking about technology, which for me was the most interesting. For him, clearly he's not really that interested. And you can kind of tell in his tone that he's like, yeah, I'm going to have to do this. This is my broccoli. I got to do it just because everybody's doing it. But I find this the most interesting. And he talks about chapter 12 and your brand. And your brand is who you are on social media. And the more you're on social media, deciding what your brand is, promoting your brand, doing all these things for your brand, you'll start to see open rates increase. You'll start to see more people sharing your posts. You'll start to see people answering your phone calls. He even uses the term gatekeepers quite frequently. Gatekeepers are the secretaries at most places. And we don't deal with that as much as he does in his business, but the concept is still true that, you know, the gatekeepers for us might be other agents, might be other obstacles getting in our way of getting to the person. And the more you do your brand, the more they see you everywhere, the more likely they are not just to take that call, but to talk to you and trust you because they think they know you very well as well. He talks about, for a cold lead, somebody you don't know already, it takes about 20 to 50 touches, and he's not too specific with the time frame. I'd say probably 9 months is 6 months, 9 months is probably the time frame he's talking about. But it's usually 20 to 50 touches before you get into the familiarity threshold. And he says that the familiarity threshold is when people stop calling you mister and just start referring to you by your name. Hey, Billy, I saw you the other day. Hey, saw you at church. Hey, saw you out eating. It changes who they are and their perception of you. So once you get those touches and you start becoming more familiar and they start trusting you, that changes your relationship with them. And then he decides, and this theme has been throughout the themes of all the books we've done, every social media thing I've ever watched and got into, that nobody cares about you. That's just the brutal truth. Just figure, it doesn't matter what you can do, who you are, whatnot, necessarily as much as how your brand will help them, how your brand will help your client. That is what's most important. That's what they need to know and need to hear. And they need to be able to trust you and your brand that you're able to help them with whatever they need. And that is the key, and that wraps chapter 12 up really nicely. And that is the essential part of all of your social media, all of your posts, all of your branding, is what you are giving them. They don't care about you if it's not helping them. All right, so do know that, and if it makes you cry a little bit inside, that's perfectly fine. Get over it, you'll move on. 13, we're moving into 13. And he continues on the social media talks, and he talks more about, and he spends quite some time about social selling, and the idea of social selling, he kind of gears it more towards like selling products and selling things, and you're trying to sell this online, and it's not going to be too helpful. We, in real estate, do a little bit of social selling, and he talks about it a little bit in the sense that if you're going to do social selling, it's going to be social selling of you. It's not going to be social selling of like lipstick or LuLaRoe or whatever. You're socially selling you, and that's the most effective way, because if you're trying to IM somebody on Facebook trying to buy a product, man, they're done. There's no way you're going to do that. If you're going to IM somebody on Facebook and say, hey, I have an open house, you're come to this, or I'm selling a house, it's still probably not going to work too much. You're trying to sell them something, doesn't work. Instead, what you want to do is you want to brand yourself. You want to give them something of value, and then you're going to sell yourself and your brand to them, which costs them nothing. They just have to pay attention. They just have to see what you're doing and be wary that you're out and about doing things for the community and for them. And that's really the social selling we should be doing, not the social selling he's talking about. And then he continues going, and these are some really, really common sense stuff. You have to be sure you're being efficient and being effective, which means deciding what you want your brand to be. That doesn't mean you have to have that same branding for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You're going to change. You are definitely going to change. But as you change and as you alter and as you grow and develop, those things should be relevant. Those things should be happening. People should be able to see you growing and developing throughout your social media. And that's how you become effective. They kind of follow you and become a part of who you are and what you're doing. And then it helps grow the size of your pipeline, and he talks about that in the sense that people are start following you more. Like I said, open rates will get better. You'll have more people jumping on board, following you and things. But you can only do that with like your effective and efficiency, and you have to decide what your branding is going to be. And he talks about that considerably. And then, as he says, as you're doing your branding and doing the things about you and all that stuff, you have to be a little subtle. You can't just say, "Hey, by the way, I'm a real estate agent." It really doesn't work that way. You instead want to do like posts about you doing some work or going to an open house, or a post of you doing a home inspection or a brand new listing or whatnot. Do subtly, these are the things that I'm doing, this is my brand, this is who I am, and then subtly sneak in and slip in the real estate part of it, this is my career, and so on and so forth. So people aren't inundated or sold on your product, they're still being sold on you as a person. And he says there's a lot of consistencies and things. He talks about the idea of making sure all of your profiles are filled out, for example. Being sure that you use the same headshot and the same logo. And we actually, as the Salmons team, just did a little contest where we wanted to change our logo, and we did a contest for it. So that way we still engage the people. We were still selling them on our brand and who we are. And we still made those changes. So we made the change to our logo, but people bought in, and they had a lot of comments. We had like 146 people that chimed in and voted on those things. So we're not selling a product still. We're selling ourselves, and we're making changes. We're developing. We're doing the things he's talking about in regards to a social selling. He spends like one little paragraph. It's a tiny paragraph. He goes right over it quickly, but I thought it was something that was really important. And he says we're in a hypersensitive world, which means when you're posting things and doing your social media, be careful. Nobody cares about your political positions. Don't do it. Nobody wants race discussions on your social media page. It's not that it's important. There's just a time and there's a place for those things. And he talks about that the world's very sensitive about various topics, and that you need to stay away. You have no interest. There's nothing for you to be gained by starting those kinds of conversations, so don't do it. It's very important, and he just spent a little bit of time covering it. I wanted to cover a little bit more so that way we covered such a topic. And then, of course, he talks more about be the expert, and this is a Tom Ferry idea. Tom Ferry means be the expert in your community. Talk about the sales that are taking place, the number of listings, what's happening in your community as far as the housing goes. People should know what's going on in your market if they follow you. They should have every idea of what's going on. And then, of course, he talks about planning, and he goes over a few paragraphs, actually, about various types of content you could be posting, places to find content, and even things like Hootsuite, and places where like you can post it and plan it. You know, I'm going to have it at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And there's lots and lots and lots of discussions about when the right time to post things are. And really, honestly, it only matters on when your people, your client base, is got downtime and are going to watch it. That's the right time to plan and to post. There's not a set time at 5 or 6 or 12. Like if you're hanging out with nurses or if you're hanging out with police officers, the best time to post stuff might be 3 a.m. because that's when they get off their shifts. Who knows? But you need to know your audience and plan. And he talks about various places that will help you plan your social media stuff as well. And the planning also helps you be consistent. Make sure you're posting at least twice a day, maybe even more. Maybe 2 articles, maybe an article, maybe a video, maybe a local community. Be sure you have a plan. Take a weekly calendar. You can have an idea of what you're going to post. Set it up for yourself so that way you're not doing any thinking. Take the thinking part out of it. All right, and have these kinds of posts this week. And if something comes up for you, then post something else as well. So there's almost no such thing as too much. I mean, if you're posting stuff every 10, 15 minutes, yeah, that's too much. But 3 times, or 4 times, or 2 times a day, that's pretty normal. That's fine. You're not overdoing it in that regard. But if you're planning on doing 2 and you posted 4 because stuff happened that day, don't freak out. You're perfectly fine. All right, be consistent, have a plan, be the expert. All right, so we're moving into chapter 14, and after he spends those 2 chapters talking about social media, he dives right back into call, phone call, make the call. Don't just rely on social media to do the work for you. He has got plenty of examples and data and information about how social media doesn't lead to appointments. Social media is a complement to actually interacting with people. And he hammers that home in 14, 15, and for the rest of the book. All right. So he goes back to the idea and he says it's very, very simple. You need to pick up the phone. Pick up the phone, talk to people. Send messages to people, text message if you really want to, but the most and the best is simply sitting in front of people, calling people, and talking to people. Those are the best ways. You have to understand that you're interrupting their day. It's going to happen, and just be okay with it. And that there's going to get a lot of no's. All right, you're going to get a lot of no's, a lot of people tell you to go away. He actually has a quick story about one of his, I think it's his group, his group, one of his facilities, one of his teams, and they have contests in the morning to see who can get the most no's by 9 a.m., by 10 a.m. And they just go through and make as many calls as they want and try to get no's. And whoever gets the most no's gets a prize. And they do contests like that. He talks about it in the book as well. And then he talks about ways to talk to people. There's different ways. You want to bring in an illogical, an emotional, and then the ask. And he talks about the illogical being the reason why you're calling, the reason why you can provide them a service. All right? And then you bring in, once you, this is why I can help you, this is what my company does for you, the emotional. And the emotional is, here's how you'll feel afterwards. You know, I know you're tired because you have been searching for houses forever and ever. All right? I know you are a busy single mother that doesn't have time to look up listings. I know that you're moving from here to Wisconsin, and that must be really wearing you out. Here are the things that I can give to you to make that so much easier and to provide you with a service. All right? Logical to emotional, and then once you go over the emotional, then ask. You know, can I help you? When's the next time we can sit down to visit? Do you have any questions about the paperwork? All right? These three things are the things that have to happen in those conversations at some point in time. And he talks about the idea of you want to quickly interrupt them, quickly get to the point, and quickly get that no. Because once you get that no, then you can move on and pivot. And give the reasons why you should be helping them, why your service is the best. Or even, if they're just flat out no, when's the best time to check back in? Can I call you back in a week? Can I call you back in 10 days? Can I call you back in November? Whatever. Okay? So that's chapter 4, back to the basics. Alright? And then he spends a little bit, 15 was pretty short as well. He talks about the art of following up, which I just talked about a little bit. But be sure you call, make sure you follow up, make sure you put those people in your CRM, so that way you don't make the phone call and never call them back again because your mouth will be you're wasting your time if that's the case. Call them, put in your CRM when you called them, how the conversation went, what kind of things were they interested in, so that way when you call back in a certain number of days, 10 days, 4 days, 3 days, 8 days, 1 month, you have an idea of what you guys talked about and you have an idea of what they need, and it really cuts right back to saving time. You're interrupting them, so you need to get right to the point and not waste their time. Okay? And then, of course, the most important thing, and we keep hammering that thing home, is have a script. Have a couple of things. You're logical to emotional, then the ask. Our last book, he talked about very specific things you have in your script as well.